All right, everybody, welcome to Winners, Wallets, and Worldviews. I'm your host, AJ Armstrong, where we bring you winners, people crushing it in all respects of life. We talk wallets, personal finance, entrepreneurship, real estate, the works of how you can be successful financially. And finally, worldviews. We talk about the deep underlying philosophies that drive people and asking those deep questions about life. Today's guest is Matt Kopko. Now, Matt is the Vice President of Public Policy at DailyPay. Really an interesting discussion we have around the future of what it means to be paid on demand as far as how payroll works. But Matt is a very interesting person. He served at a role of public policy at the company Bird. You guys probably know them as little scooters that buzz around in big cities. He was also a senior government official, and he was an attorney in private practice. He's got a bachelor's degree from Princeton University, and he's got a JD MBA combo from the University of Chicago. We talk about what the future of payroll looks like as far as recruiting and retaining talent. So if you guys are mature enough in your business operations where you have employees, this is something that's really interesting and something you might be able to implement right away as a strategy or a tactic for how you can improve the retention and recruiting of some of these types of employees. So this was a really interesting interview, guys. I really hope you enjoy it. Matt has a wide range of experience from his own startups experience to, as you can tell, being involved with quite a large startup venture here. And it was really interesting to listen to him and his insights today. So without further ado, I bring you Matt Kopko. Welcome to the show.
Welcome to Winners, Wallets, and Worldviews, the only show that's going to teach you
how to be somebody.
Where in your life did you learn that you're not good enough?
Take what you're most passionate about and what you're most fearful of. And what is the plan to overcome that fear? And what is the plan to enact that passion?
All right, everybody, welcome to Winners, Wallets, and Worldviews. I'm your host, AJ Armstrong, and we are coming to you with Matt Kopko, who's going to talk to us about some different small business or even large business payroll strategies that you guys can work with. Every once in a while, we like to offer, what's kind of like up and coming as far as actual practices you can start to implement in your business itself, or what's kind of in the front is business news. And Matt's coming to us from a company, DailyPay, but we're also going to hear a little bit about his background in the entrepreneurship realm and how he moved into this company, DailyPay. Matt, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
This is a real treat having you on today. Really appreciate you making it. But tell me, Matt, a little bit for our listeners that might not be familiar with you as a person or kind of where you came from, just a little bit about your background and upbringing.
Yeah, sure. Well, always been kind of an enterprising, entrepreneurial young guy. Starting in high school, started some businesses with my brother first. Like polling, internet business, website creation kind of stuff. Your typical kind of high school business creation stuff.
Yeah.
And then when I went to college, actually, the first like real business we started was a company called Doormaid that was doing laundry delivery, room cleaning, and grocery services for college students. And that kind of quickly turned into a kind of a nationwide company. And we sold that because we didn't want to be doing college kids' underwear for the rest of our lives, but moved on to that to law school, become a practicing attorney, represented private equity and financial companies, and then venture capital investors and entrepreneurs. And then I went off into government service and have been working at the cutting edge of regulation. Before I was at DailyPay, I was actually at the scooter company Bird, working on some of the regulatory issues that whole industry is dealing with. So my career has kind of brought me to a point where I've been entrepreneurially focused, but really focused on this area of where new law and disruptive technology impacts existing regulation.
Yeah, that's something I've talked about on the show before, is how it seems like people have this idea that you're either an entrepreneur or you work for a company. And I just feel like that's so false in so many ways, is that a lot of it is just business instincts, being able to find out what your market value or what your skills are used for and where they can be most appropriately allocated. Tell me a little bit about what your thoughts are on that, I guess, just coming from both, kind of bouncing back between the two as your own business person.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree with that. I mean, a couple good examples are, I served in the government for about a year and a half in transportation regulatory capacity. And, no one thinks of the government as kind of a pro-entrepreneurial, pro-innovation kind of type of atmosphere, but it really is kind of your personal culture and what you bring to it. Are you able to kind of, make changes and inspire people based on your mindset and approach. So, even in my short time in government, I was able to work on some really cool stuff. I was able to be part of standing up new drone regulations, built out the first regulatory structure for Hyperloop, which is now being used as kind of some of these projects come underway. And so, you can apply that mindset in government. And then even for me personally, in between Bird and DailyPay, I went back into private practice at a law firm where you kind of are, working for someone more formally than rather being in this kind of more entrepreneurial startup environment. And for me, it was bringing that same type of creativity to help counsel entrepreneurs and venture capitalists on how they can, do their best job. And you may be working for someone in all of these roles, but, entrepreneurialism and creative thinking and being a good business advocate or business advisor, part of it is kind of who you are as a person and the mentality you bring to it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. That's just, you're almost your own business person. And a lot of times too, in companies, large companies, they will have little startup activities where they'll allocate a certain amount of funds over to a more risk seeking kind of venture. And they want to test out the market because that's obviously, companies aren't dynamic. The big giant companies are very difficult. They're steering a ship. So sometimes they'll put a little kitty over here with a couple innovative people and try to come up with unique ideas. I mean, the only difference between an entrepreneur and that type of role is really an entrepreneur is out there seeking the capital themselves, might have their own risk and time into it. But it's really the activities and things they're going through are really no different.
Yeah, and we actually, funny enough, just bringing it full circle at DailyPay, we work with some of those innovative large corporate groups. So we have an amazing partnership with ADP, for example, and we actually interface through the ADP Innovative Ventures kind of arm, which is, you think of ADP as this kind of large historical payroll organization, but they've stood up this kind of internal, innovation venture focused group, and we've been interfacing with them and helping build out new products and services with them. And those type of partnerships are always very exciting.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about DailyPay, because when I'm browsing through, I'm always looking at different things on the internet, and one thing you're starting to see advertised to people who might be like W-2 employees or get paid pretty consistently is you're starting to see them say like, hey, well, get your paycheck 2 weeks early or get your paycheck 3 weeks early and all this stuff. And it was kind of interesting to start seeing that advertised. And I know that DailyPay is kind of filling in that from a user perspective. But tell me a little bit more about what this company does and how it's kind of revolutionizing the way people look at payroll from a business standpoint and from an employee standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, it's super awesome technology. It's kind of like a foundational shift in payroll, the way we think about it. I'll give you a couple, analogies and kind of can dive into the deeper detail on how the service and technology works. But essentially imagine it as a digital ATM for your paycheck. So, the simplest example is if you're salaried, right? You get paid every 2 weeks, you earn 1/14 of that paycheck every day you show up at work. If you're fired, or in a lot of states, if you leave, you're pretty much entitled to your paycheck immediately. Some states have it 72 hours, other states have it on the next scheduled paycheck. But the idea is there's this difference between earned and unearned income. And why, as a society, have we decided that I'm going to essentially give my employer a loan weeks at a time to accumulate pay they owe to me? And just because of accounting and payroll convenience, they only pay me once or twice a month. I mean, most people don't realize that 2 out of 3 workers are paid either once or twice a month. So most of Americans are going either a full month in between getting paid or 2 weeks in between getting paid. And so where DailyPay came in was we had this idea that if we use big data to integrate with the employer's existing systems, right? Like we can validate, let's say you work at a grocery store or a retail chain, you clock in and out with your hours. We can validate what your actual, earned hours in this pay period are to date. And we know through your employer's systems what your existing payroll deductions and accounting elections are. So we have this, what we call our dynamic income algorithm that predicts, with near perfect precision, how much net of taxes, deductions, withholding you earned today. Not like as a loan on your future paycheck, but how much you earned today. And then we give you the option through our technology to cash out whenever you want or not at all. And if you don't cash out at all, it doesn't charge you a penny. And the idea is essentially saying like, let's turn this whole idea of payroll on its head. What would the world look like if employers actually ran payroll every day? Since they can't from an overhead standpoint, our technology uses kind of these new payments rails and big data integration to allow people to get paid whenever they want without having to disrupt their employer's accounting practices. So as you can imagine, this is super attractive from an employee standpoint, the idea of being able to get paid whenever you need it. I mean, I know personally, you probably have the same experience when you were young in your career, when you had that kind of next check coming due, but you had rent due a couple of days beforehand, you got to debate like, Do I go borrow money from friends? Do I have to go pay a payday loan? Do I go bounce a check or pay overdraft fees? And the idea that, life can be reoriented around your financial needs is really kind of, platform altering for most employees. And then happier employees leads to more productive employees, leads to employees who stay longer. And we have demonstrated benefits on the employer side as well, saying lower turnover means lower retraining costs and higher productivity for the average worker. So it's an amazing win-win that just the ability to help the frequency of pay move faster and more effectively using this new technology is impacting the entire employer-employee relationship. We call it the pay experience.
Now, have you seen anybody take a lump sum at the beginning of the year? I mean, can you do something like that? Or because you'd think that would be a significant advantage for an employee to be like, hey, I'll take my paycheck at the beginning of the year. Obviously, you would be in debt to your employer for some prolonged period of time, whether it's the entire year, but you'd be able to gain a lot of benefit from interest investing. But I feel like the employer would also lose out on that opportunity as you're paying up front too.
So that's where my job comes in really importantly. I'm the vice president of policy at DailyPay, and I make sure that we abide by all existing law and regulation. As you can imagine, wages are a very heavily regulated area of law, and then moving money to and from people is also super heavily regulated. So again, our service is not a payday loan. It's not any sort of kind of longer term payback mechanism. It's that idea of we calculate exactly what you've earned to date and we make it available to you.
It's like a continuous kind of spectrum, not necessarily a discrete spectrum, right?
Exactly. So you open our app and it'll literally say oh, we see you clocked in 9 hours yesterday. Our algorithm has, shown through integration with your employer that your net pay from yesterday would have been $122. You want to just know that and move along with your life saying, okay, that's super helpful to know because, I used to get paid every 2 weeks in a black box. I don't know how much I'm earning every day. This $200 expense came up in between. Should I is this going to bankrupt me or can I pay it now? And then for them, it's either just use that information to be a better consumer and saver and investor, or if you need it because you have a bill coming due or an unexpected expense, flat tire, something like that, you can, like an ATM, say this is my money. I can cash it out right now. Only what I've earned, nothing more.
Sure. That's interesting. Tell me a little bit, you mentioned that you've seen just turnover kind of slow down because of this. Why do you think that is? What are the reasons that, a company that has several employees would say, what's the benefit for me? I think the benefit of the employee for sure, right? You can see what I earned at what point in time, but why is this good for a business in general?
Yeah. So, we serve a lot of low and middle income industries, especially, retail, grocery, food services, healthcare, home care. And, you'd be shocked to look at the amount of turnover in some of these industries. I mean, some parts of retail literally have 300% per year turnover. That means that employees are staying on average 4 months. And typically when you look at some of the studies and polling that's done, the single biggest reason why people move on from a job is financial. And so it's either they're not making enough to make ends meet or they have an issue come up. A lot of people, I've heard countless stories about people who have to choose to not come to work the 2 days before a paycheck is due because they've run out of gas money. So the idea of being able to get paid daily is a huge recruiting sell. And we see people literally offer, talk about DailyPay in their recruiting ads, be come work at Wendy's or come work at this location because you can get paid daily. And so even if you change that average tenure from 4 months to 6 months, for an employer that's spending so much money recruiting, retraining, and finding new employees, having to find those, at a rate of 2/3 of what they were spending before, we've kind of done some back of the envelope extrapolation on a national basis. We're talking about saving employers hundreds of millions of dollars across the economy by having to invest less in these high churn, high turnover industries. And people churn and turn over in these industries because the experience isn't great and it's not helping them make ends meet. So anything that they can do as an employer to enhance the financial wellness of their employees means happier employees who stay longer. It also means, by the way, too, if you can see on a shift by shift basis how much you've made, the idea of picking up an extra shift for a friend is no longer just, oh, I'm doing them a favor and who knows what I'll get paid 2 weeks from now. You can look at it that night or the next morning and be like, man, that favor I did just earned me $140. So on average, it helps people be more productive as well because they have that direct feedback loop of information to say the fruits of my labor are much more front and center in my mind now. So every shift is actually meaningful to me. Every dollar I earn, every hour I work is meaningful to me because I know about it more.
Yeah. So it sounds like the real draw is going to be also the company's ability to sell that to some of those kind of more labor intensive, I guess, professions in a lot of ways, because that's something that, you kind of forget about is just sometimes your bills are inconsistent. Like I have bills that are kind of staggered out throughout the entire month. So I could see how that would benefit people to be able to kind of pull out when they need to at the right time and never have that issue of fundamentally budgeting, putting money away. Do you think that's going to cause any downsides to the way people budget? Do you think it's feeding into a problem of people who already struggle to budget and making it even harder, or do you think it helps?
Yeah, so that question is, very important and near and dear to my heart. We looked into this specifically, actually, and we asked our users, over 1,500 of them, does having access to this service make you more or less able to make your large monthly payments? Like, does having access to DailyPay make you have not enough left over at the end of your paycheck so that you can pay rent or your auto bill, or does it make you more able? And by a margin of over 20-1, it was resoundingly saying this helps me, makes me more able, because it's hard sometimes to put yourself in the mind of someone who is really struggling paycheck to paycheck, which over half of Americans are. And the idea of getting dinged for a $30 late fee or a $35 overdraft charge because your bill came due 2 days before your paycheck, for us, using DailyPay is, $1.99 for the next day service, or you can get your money instantly within 20 minutes if you pay $2.99. So, there are millions of Americans who are turning to payday loans, paying hundreds of dollars in interest, or paying $35 a pop for an overdraft fee, sometimes multiple times a month. And the idea to take all of that away and turn that into $2 or $3 is so financially compelling that it makes people more financially capable. It increases their financial wellness. And from the estimates I did from this study, which I can walk through you on, we did kind of a segment by segment estimation cost wise. It saves you about $100 a month for the average people who we serve, because they're so heavily reliant, sadly, on payday loans, overdraft fees, and things like that.
That's crazy to think about. And I mean, when you're looking at the alternative as something like a payday loan or these, loan sharks that have such high interest rates or overdraft fees and
credit card debt too. I mean, credit card debt is in the 20+% rate.
Right. And when you're looking at as all those, it seems to me like even if you look at it from a budgeting standpoint, it's really just removing a step, right? Because otherwise it's going to be, I'm taking the money out, I'm going to put it into this little account, and then I'm going to withdraw it from there. But this, it kind of removes the step of needing to take it out and put it into an account. It just kind of sits there and accumulates based on time. It's not necessarily changing the money anywhere. It's just removing the idea of doing that. Yeah. And I think that, so it's hard to think that would be a way that would remove this intention of budgeting, right? Or this idea of budgeting from an employee. But when you're looking at the downside to what other people are doing, you drive by these places all the time, right? Next to usually next to the massage parlor or whatever. And there's the payday lender. And you're just like, oh my gosh, people actually support these businesses and they do it aggressively. When we were in the military, right outside every military base is payday lenders, used car sales dealerships, right? Because they can just take advantage of people right out of high school. They're very vulnerable soldiers that don't know anything because they just graduated. They come from a rough family situation, and they're just completely taken advantage of by predatory lending.
Yeah, and what a lot of people don't realize is it takes that extra level of financial capability or even financial understanding to really put the pieces together on how harmful it actually is. Because sometimes, as they're very clever marketing these loan products. It's like, oh, it's only $15, and the next thing you know, you're thousands of dollars in debt. So Pew did a really, the Pew Research Group did a really exhaustive study on payday loans, and it was shocking, some of the results. They said the average payday loan is rolled over 8 times, which means that that introductory $15 fee actually is kind of just more of a hook to get you on the hook for 8 months. And for your average $375 payday loan, you end up paying $520 in interest alone, not just the repayment of principal. So, it's sad because these entire industries are built on people, and regulation is one thing. A lot of people have tried to regulate payday loans, bring them out, but we used financial technology to be a payday loan killer and an overdraft fee killer. We didn't need the government to come in and say, hey, I'm going to ban the way you want to do this, or I'm going to take away choices from you. We said, let's just let new technology proliferate. And the idea that you can turn that need to take out a payday loan that can spiral into $520 just down the drain into a $2 or $3 charge is what really motivates us every day, because we wake up knowing that every time someone uses our service, it's because they were faced with a much worse option. And they just we don't even solicit feedback. Our users write into us voluntarily on a weekly basis being like, I had a flat tire. I thought my entire like financial life was going to fall apart, and DailyPay was there for the cost of $2 or $3 to catch me.
Yeah, I can definitely see the appeal from a retention standpoint too, right? Because you're going to have employees that get used to this idea of, once they're kind of into the system, you've implemented this idea of like on-demand pay. Employees are going to get used to that. They're going to, budget accordingly. They're going to have this idea that they can kind of withdraw with however many hours they worked at whatever period of time. And I think it'll make it much more difficult for them to want to leave, right?
Yeah.
So like if you're implementing this in your business, it's going to be a nice little incentive or a nice little perk for people, because they're going to be like, oh crap, I got to go back to a monthly paycheck or whatever, instead of this idea that now you've kind of built a habit for them.
Yeah, so we think the world is going this way. We think in a few years people are gonna look back and be like, wait, what? Like I was going 4 weeks at a time before I got an actual like payroll deposit. Like what is that about technology wise? And we're part of the couple different people who are building this technology to make that a reality. So if it becomes the natural course for employment to be this way, it'll be in part because we decided to go so aggressively at this space and push the technology. I think a couple things there though is, once you have access to this kind of just mindset reframing that like, wait a second, I should be able to get paid whenever I want. I'm working every day, I'm earning every day. Like I shouldn't have to go weeks at a time. Like it's definitely like not like hard to go back, but it's like, why would I ever want to go back? So we find people who literally will like apply for jobs based on whether or not they offer a daily pay benefit. And then the other thing that's coming very interesting into this whole conversation of what it means to work in the 21st century is it's actually pretty standard in gig work to get paid at the end of every shift. Uber and Lyft and DoorDash offer these opportunities to cash out at the end of your shift.
That's a good point.
When our company first started, we actually tried selling this product to Uber drivers. We realized, quickly thereafter that going to employers directly was a much more successful opportunity. But just in that kind of struggle to maintain high quality, good paying jobs in the face of the increasing gigification of the workforce, yet another thing that was going the way of gig work was like this idea to get paid flexibly or on demand. And we've built this for those W-2 employees who can say, I'm still earning a hard-earned paycheck. I want to have my benefits. I want to have my good paying job, but I shouldn't have to give up the idea of being able to be paid frequently.
Yeah, this is, I think that's interesting. Like you're totally revolutionizing the way people think about cash itself, right? Is like you're having this instantness. And one thing that I was wondering is, have you guys noticed, like, what is the frequency by which most people tend to withdraw? Like I can picture a couple buddies of mine that would probably just go months without ever taking it out, just let it stack up. And then I could also see someone that's just sitting there draining it out every day. What have you guys found seems to be the most popular, or like, I'm sure you guys have looked into that before, right?
Yeah, I mean, people definitely don't use it daily. It's kind of just the name of the company. On average, they use it about kind of once a week or so. But the really interesting part of what you're picking up here is the psychology of it. They may only access the service once a week, but they check their balance every day, which means that just the informational benefit of knowing how much you earned yesterday is really valuable to people. And I totally understand that, because if you're trying to like budget out or figure out how much to go, spend on lunch with friends or dinner with friends after a shift, like knowing that like, oh, every day I really only make, $140, $160 or $110, whatever it is, that builds, we call these mental heuristics in your mind that help you just build kind of that like reptilian brain on the fly budgeting. And so the informational benefit of the services alone, and actually most interactions with our app, people don't even request a payment. But every day they might be checking it, but about once a week they actually ask to make use of the service.
That actually brings up an interesting idea, and you guys might be on this already, but it's like, people are so motivated by that short-term progress, by that dopamine hit, that you actually may be getting more productive employment out of this, because they have that ability to check their status. How am I doing? I made $1 extra, I made $20 extra, whatever that is. And it's going to just keep feeding into that, because one of the difficult parts of being an entrepreneur is, I think one of the reasons why a lot of entrepreneurs find themselves unsuccessful is because of that delayed gratification, is because you get this just no idea how I'm doing for 3 years, and all of a sudden it hits. But if you wanted to maximize productivity, so entrepreneurs have to be clever with how they make all these little productive wins. But if you're just working with your employees and your staff and you want to show them, hey, your work every day is being counted, it's being accumulated continuously, it seems like that could be a really nice little side benefit to this as well, about showing how productive they really are. Because in coaching and consulting with a lot of entrepreneurs, that's the hardest part, is showing them you're making progress even though you didn't get a paycheck deposited yesterday, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, you're also reminding me of just pardon a little tangent here, but when I used to represent entrepreneurs and startups as an attorney, I'm just thinking of one client who was doing really cool stuff in the like urban farming space, and like they were chugging along for years, looking at, potentially a really bad day ahead of them, for the future prospects of the company. And then like 2 or 3 days later, an investor came in and was like, I want to give you $10 million. And like that uncertainty as an entrepreneur is just like so overwhelming. So my hat goes off to all people who kind of slog through that pain and don't know, like, am I building an Uber or am I building a train wreck right now? But as it relates more to DailyPay, like, yeah, this for us, it's more about like helping you understand your money better, interact with your money better. And our mission is to help you take your first steps towards financial freedom. So, the first step is stopping the bleeding. You should never have to take out a payday loan ever again in your life. As long as you have something like DailyPay around, never should have to do that again. Then you should never be able to have to overdraft or pay a late fee on a bill anymore now, because you can just do the math there, right? Like, would I rather pay a $30 late fee or pay $2 to service like DailyPay? And then, first of all, you're becoming a better spender because you're saving the money. And then also because payday can be any day, you're not off blowing your paycheck every other Friday because they're like, woohoo, it's payday. You're now spending more responsibly because this is now kind of a much more direct relationship from a cash flow and information standpoint with your own money. So we find it's incredible financial wellness benefits for people. And then also, as you mentioned, kind of from an employee standpoint, it's a large stress reducer. The idea of like having to stress every day, but being like, man, when is my next paycheck going to come? Am I going to have enough money in the meantime to feed my family? Always knowing that you have that assurance helps people be happier, more productive. And so we see like not only are employees demanding this, but employers are demanding this.
Yeah, I just read an article. I believe it was actually yesterday. I might even still have it up on my browser on the incentive structure with customers. So like when, for example, when a customer they pay instantly, they tend to understand the value and they can assess the value of that product much better than someone that might have to pay an invoice later on or something like that. Then there's a disconnect between the value perception. I'm wondering if there's also some study that could go into this with a productivity standpoint with an employee, right? If you're paid at the end of a year, it might not, like, you just get this drop lump sum or whatever, you're paid monthly and you just get this lump sum. I'm wondering if it's much more beneficial to have them recognize the value and they can recognize the fruits of their labor continuously and instantly. I think there might be a really interesting case you could look into with how this would impact motivation and productivity levels with someone to see that every day, like, okay, at the end of the day, I earned this amount, versus compare that to a controlled group that does it monthly or biweekly, like your traditional pay. I bet you'd see way more just productivity out of that, because that's the hardest part, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole field of research that's not related to what we do, but kind of right about that space you're talking about. It's called behavioral economics. And they study essentially how psychology interacts, how we deal with money. So like the old thinking of economics was like people are rational acting robots and like
right, classic
money,
economics.
Neoclassical economics, right? What we learned was there's all these things like the availability heuristic and the representative heuristic. That means that like people are much more kind of animalistic in nature with how they interact with their information. So if you just take kind of the interaction point where like you get a paycheck every 2 weeks, you kind of have that, everyone who started working a job has that first experience of like, wait a second, I thought I was earning like $18 an hour. Why does my paycheck show like 35% less than that? Because it's taxes, deductions, withholding, healthcare, all that kind of stuff. So not only helping people bridge that gap, but know on a daily basis how much net of taxes you earn, you allow to build that mental accounting much better and to become a better spender. You can become a better consumer. You become a better saver too. So you're absolutely right. I work on some of those partnerships. We've been working with some leading educational institutions and also nonprofits to bring some of that research to life. But for us, kind of, it validates the technology in and of itself, just knowing that like, it's just like when we talk about the idea that like the app balance is accessed so often compared to just like the moving of money, you can tell that there's value there alone. Even if we never touched money or moved money in the first place, the mere information benefit from giving someone a net income update on a daily basis. And by the way, some of our newer partners who have more technologically advanced systems, they do the data syncing on an hourly basis. So you can like literally watch during the day as your balance accumulates just being at work. And like that information is building a whole kind of set of decision-making and set of kind of
And
approaches to
it's
life.
reinforcing that, right?
Yeah, and you're getting better at it, right? Because you're learning like, oh, this is what $120 means because it's today versus like black box every 2 weeks, some weird number that I don't even understand shows up in my bank account.
Yeah, it reminds me of this. One of the first jobs I had, I was reffing a basketball game, and it was like $12 an hour, and it was kind of like that though, where you're like paid at the end. I only worked a half day, and then you're paid right at the end of the day, and it's like it makes you really feel it when you go to spend $12 because I was like, I just did this $12 an hour thing, but you see with biweekly or annual or whatever or monthly pay, you start to disconnect yourself from the pain, so you don't necessarily feel it. I think with this, it gives you the opportunity to like see that happen in real time. Like, okay, I just did this. Like, I'm going to be much less if I'm making $100 an hour or whatever. Like, I'm going to be much less likely to spend $100 because I just felt how hard that was, and I'm doing all this kind of thing that you continuously disconnect yourself from when you break apart pay cycles.
Yeah, and for people who are kind of financially blessed or able to be in a high earning category, they don't really need a service like this. For people who really are struggling, paycheck to paycheck and having to turn to some of these really predatory alternatives, it does make all the difference. And like it's a known, researched and documented thing. It's called the payday splurge effect. When people go off and blow their paycheck on payday, because it's like, it's a lot of money. Like, what happens if I only spent, like, who cares if I spend a couple hundred of it? Like, it's a lot of money. I'll have the rest of it left over. Versus if you were like, yeah, you just ate 3 days of your paycheck. If you think about it more like that way, you will definitely be much more thoughtful when you go spend that money.
What's that show on Netflix? It was like Shameless. Have you ever seen that show with one of the characters? What's the guy's name? Frank Gallagher or something like that?
Oh,
Yeah.
I think I know what you're talking about. Was it a Showtime show or?
Yeah, I think it used to be on Showtime and Netflix bought it up. Well, it's funny that this character, he's just kind of a deadbeat guy. And it's at the end of the month, he gets his disability pay. He just goes right to the bar and burns it all completely. And it's just funny that, we talk about this too, because it seems like that there is, we forget that's a obvious little hyperbole and a little bit of satire, but that's an exaggeration of how a lot of Americans tend to spend their paychecks and how a lot of people budget and do things. And in a lot of ways, the demographic that a lot of small business owners have sometimes reaches a type of personality that can be low in conscientiousness as far as their personality traits. And it's not like a good or bad thing. It's not a knock on anybody, but you tend to find that people with high conscientiousness or ability to continuously delay gratification thrive in levels of middle to upper management or entrepreneurship or success in socioeconomic demographics. People who are low in conscientiousness tend to find themselves in some of these, entry level job positions at retail and in other industries, restaurants and stuff like that. So when you're looking at this, it satisfies that itch in a lot of ways too, for someone that might not have the ability to naturally delay gratification so far out like a lot of these other entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and for us, we view it as it's nobody's fault. I mean, the system, frankly, isn't set up for the low and middle income to succeed. It's getting harder and harder to make ends meet. There's inflation going on in housing, and durable goods throughout the pandemic has been just horrendous. So, if you're already struggling to make ends meet and your employer's telling you like, hey, look, like you have to go 4 weeks before your next paycheck, like it's not about how good or bad you may be at personal discipline. It's like you're foisted with a system that it's like, how am I supposed to stretch this paycheck out for 4 weeks, not knowing, how much I'm going to get next time around. So that information benefit for us is like an opportunity to help people get more educated personally about how they interact with their money. And the way we call it, again, the pay experience is like, you should be able to interact with your pay in a different way that reflects the 21st century and reflects all this technology we have, instead of these kind of old direct deposit laws that were written around the time of World War II.
How do you think the industry in general is going to shape, around just payroll or kind of like, accounting practices too, as far as it relates to wages payable, receipt, that kind of thing?
Yeah. So, our CEO likes to talk about how, 2 years ago or so, when we were at the table, we were often, we do a lot of this through kind of the corporate RFP process. A couple of years ago, a lot of companies didn't even have an RFP process for this. It was just like, oh, this is awesome. Like, you're the only game in town. Like, let's do it. And so we had almost no competition a couple of years ago to now like aggressive competition. Like PayPal just invested in one of our competitors. companies in the payroll business like Ceridian and ADP are getting into the space too. Square, the massive financial, tech company run by Jack Dorsey, just announced they're doing something similar to what we do, but not as, fully technologically integrated as what we offer. And so, what we really saw is like, this is the future of pay, and you can do it through like having a team of people who run payroll, like just get way busier and run payroll more often, or you can use technology and the way that you can essentially calculate out on a net basis from like, technology and algorithms and computing can tell you that like based on these accounting withholdings, if that person worked 9 hours tomorrow at this rate, they get paid that amount. So we just leverage it to make the payroll department more effective and able to provide better value to their employees without it. And seen a ton of competition coming into the space. For us, it's like, you probably know this as an entrepreneur, right? Like when you have the big guys jumping into your space, like part of you is like, instinctually like, like we're about to have to compete with the big dogs, but it's also validating because if the big dogs are getting into the space, it means that this is a real thing. It's prime time. And like, we just rolled out DailyPay to all of Target, all Target employees across the nation, all of Dollar General employees across the nation.
Do you get the commission on that one or not?
I know, right? Above a certain level of the company, you don't get commission. And our sales folks are just so impressive. I mean, these are sometimes multi-year courting processes. And now, especially with the competition, you have to win out in a very competitive RFP process. So when you see Fortune 100s and Fortune 500 jumping into the space to offer it, and you see a lot of these large legacy players and new kind of semi-related technology companies also jumping into the space to compete with you, you know that you're onto something really cool.
Tell me a little bit about like, you mentioned how some of these bigger players are jumping into the game. When you're looking at that, what are you guys doing from like a business strategy perspective to continue to kind of be agile and maintain your edge despite having these just massive resources being thrown into your kind of pot?
Yeah. So, one thing that's cool about us is we're independent so that, people don't realize how complex the space is. Like, it's not just your payroll system, it's your time and attendance system, it's your accounting systems. It can be several data streams. And like, a legacy payroll provider may offer your payroll service, but you may use another company to do your time and attendance. So sometimes some of these, more historically kind of legacy payroll companies are like, well, you have to use our time and attendance system, and you have to use our accounting system, and you have to use our payroll system, and then we'll be able to offer something similar to this to you. We got to get our edge saying we'll work with everyone. And we know that everyone, especially, companies, that have built their systems before this new technology came to be, have those disparate systems. So every part of our sales process is, building out a custom implementation timeline to be able to say like, your time and attendance doesn't talk to your payroll, and your accounting and tax system doesn't talk to your time and attendance system. And we actually build custom tech for every one of our employers, which is part of why we focus on, larger size employers, to build those seamless integrations, whether it's through an API or through SFTP or anything like that. So the edge we really get is that idea to be able to say like, you don't have to, have X, Y, or Z, specific technology partner in place to be able to use DailyPay. If you, pay your employees on a less frequent schedule than you'd like, and we're able to build a technology integration to verify what they've earned to date. Salary is super easy, like I said, but like most of our business is not salaried, it's hourly. So as long as you have a time and attendance system, an accounting system, and a payroll system, we can work with you. And so our edge is being able to go to anyone and offer this service, as opposed to saying you need to have XYZ in place. Because employers who are doing this, part of why we have the DailyPay edge is that we tell them you have to keep your existing payroll system in place. You don't have to have your HR people now all of a sudden just have their lives destroyed by having to process one-off wage deductions, thousands of times. I mean, imagine you're a company that employs 20,000 people, right? And every time someone wanted to use DailyPay, that created some sort of additional process on the HR department. Like they would revolt and they'd be like, there's no way in hell we're letting this technology come into our company, because I would need to hire an army of people just to keep up with it. So our edge is building this technology that allows existing processes to stay in place, no additional burden or overhead on payroll. DailyPay handles the rest.
I think that's an interesting point, because you see a lot of software companies that they're pushing a cradle to grave solution in almost all ways, to where they can't fit themselves in to the right place for the only, like there's a whole list of requirements, and then there might be one that they actually care about. And it's like, that's the one that this software can do. And some of these other ones are like, oh no, we're going to sell you this. We're going to sell you this. It's got to be an entire seamless system. And you're starting to see that the ones that are starting to pull themselves away in this niche are the ones that can work on these Frankenstein kind of projects, that they can patch together multiple different softwares, different companies with different, APIs, et cetera, and they can pull that all into one generally seamless solution to where it's not a cradle to grave solution. And I think that's something that people that might be interested in starting apps or starting programs or whatever, there's this tendency to want to consolidate everything, it seems like, in IT businesses. But I think there is a lot of ability to use your agility and your speed to your advantage and be able to make very unique custom solutions that aren't as bureaucratic and policy oriented as like a Siemens or a PTC or one of those just massive companies that has these like big cradle to grave systems.
Well, especially, and you're in the enterprise space, newer companies sprouting up now, maybe using newer offerings that might be more integrated, but like, companies have been around for decades. Some of our partners have been around for centuries. And it's like, you've built this company over decades and you didn't just like have a reset one day and be like, all right, I'm going to go sign up to the new 2020 integrated payroll offering. You have these disparate systems that have been built and maintained by separate teams over decades because you didn't have to integrate them. And so if you're building something in the enterprise space, like the amount of, like, everyone knows when you're an enterprise, right? Like if you can get a system into a company, it becomes sticky. And like, that's an opportunity for us actually, because we know that these employers are dealing with these disparate systems and we're coming in saying, don't worry about it. We'll handle it. We'll build the tech that allows it to talk to each other. And there's all these companies that, have these legacy systems in place that, have been around, before this was a thing 3 years ago.
Yeah, it's really shaping, I think, the way IT is doing business in many different ways. Well, we're closing in on the last couple minutes here. I just wanted to give our listeners an opportunity to hear, maybe you've accomplished a lot of really cool things, just we hear with DailyPay, but also it sounds like in life. I mean, an exit with a business and things like that. What's just some like a tip or a piece of advice you'd give the group?
Yeah, I think my focus is always, when I was younger in my career, I was focusing on like, what should I do? Like keeping in my head, like, what is the thing that's going to like impress my parents or like build that notch on the resume? As you get older in your career, you realize that like, I need to be intrinsically motivated and love what I do. So for me, moving from like large finance to this more startup environment where we actually like have meaningful impact on a day-to-day basis is the motivator above all motivators. So for me, it's always been getting to that point in my career where it's about, doing something you love, because if you do that, then when you wake up in the morning, you're not like dragging yourself to work. You're working on something that's intrinsically motivating.
Yeah, that's it seems to be a recurring theme with a lot of guests on this show, is trying to find that thing that pulls you. It doesn't push you, right? Finding those things in life that can get you, pull you out of bed instead of you pushing yourself in it.
And when I was a lawyer, for example, like, I don't know how many more M&A transactions I could work on, or, how many times I could take the same document and dupe it out. And it took, hard work and hours of mental energy to make this new document, but it was like you hand it off at the end of the day and you go do the same thing all over again. And then being able to move on to say, like, I have this unique set of skills of legal experience, government experience, and be able to contribute to these entrepreneurs who are building really cool technology but aren't experts in regulation. It's been very cool to be at the, sitting at the cutting edge of technology and helping, like, I've helped, for example, when I was working at Bird before, and even here with DailyPay, like, I've helped write laws that are now on the books legalizing scooters. And like, scooters are legal in New Jersey.
I love those Bird scooters, by the way.
Yeah, I was head of legislation for Bird, and I managed a team that passed dozens of laws. We legalized scooters in about 20 states in 1 year alone. And like, when I sit out and look out my window here and I see someone riding up the street on a scooter, it's like, you feel so much satisfaction. Like, I was a small part of helping that become a reality. And now moving on with DailyPay, helping people, just like the idea that like, we'll wake up in a few years and be like, everyone's paid all the time, as opposed to like having to go for a month at a time without getting paid. It's very cool to be able to say, like, I was a part of helping build that, and also helping navigate the complex part of the law and government rules that may have prevented that.
Yeah. Well, Matt, if people want to get a hold of you, or they want to reach out, or if they want to learn a little bit more about DailyPay, like, where can they go?
Yeah, so if they want to go learn more about DailyPay, go over to dailypay.com. I also have a Twitter handle, DailyPay Policy. We have a DailyPay Twitter handle as well. And then me personally, I don't do too much social, but I'm on LinkedIn. So I'm Matthew Kopko or Matt Kopko on LinkedIn. But please, even if it's not to implement into your business, just check out dailypay.com and the technology that we offer, because it's a bit of an insight into the future of payroll and the future of financial wellness. So we're building all kinds of new tools. We have a free savings tool that's just getting rolled out to hundreds of thousands of employees. So take the same technology that allows you to get on-demand pay and now let you save whenever you want for free. We've just built that and are rolling it out now too. So there's a lot of cool, exciting things happening in the kind of staid HR payroll space, and check us out at dailypay.com.
Yeah, lots of benefits, guys, if you can tell, from not only your employees, but I think also for small business as far as retention, recruiting, and a lot of other things. Especially if you're in one of those industries that has employees that are kind of in those different financial binds occasionally, or they might struggle with budgeting. And not a knock on them. It could just be high school kids. It could just be people in college trying to make ends meet, pay their tuition. And I think that that's very relevant, especially for a lot of startups, small businesses, when they're trying to find the right employees for their group. Is they can run into situations where this could be a very appealing benefit in many different ways. And like you said, it's always good to be on the front end of a trend, even when you're the company itself, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome, guys. Well, thank you again, Matt, for listening to this show, Winners, Wallets, and Worldviews. I am your host, AJ Armstrong. You can find this episode at aaronjarmstrong.com/podcasts. And wherever you are listening to this, please leave a 5-star review and some comments, and share it with someone that you think might find some benefit or some value out of it. That helps us promote in the rankings. So thank you again, everybody. Be somebody.